kind of follow along. Okay.
So like I said, we're going to pick up where we left off. If you remember at the top of this worksheet, we started to lay out a definition of persuasion. So a friendly reminder, it is the process of changing or reinforcing good one's attitudes, beliefs, values, and most importantly for us, with the proposition of policies, action. Absolutely, everybody. So action, fantastic. So those are the defining characteristics of something in persuasion. Hello, Jessica. We then went forward, we talked a little bit about persuasion, but we started to talk about the thesis approval, but also what you need to do in order to generate the thesis, and what questions you need to start asking yourself, and what we need to identify in order to create that cohesive thesis for ourselves. So we talked a little bit about the general purpose, which we came to this conclusion. As a reminder, there are 3 different types of purposes that every single speech will fall into. And ours, the only thing that we're going to need to say here is to persuade. But it reminds us that that is our purpose and that is our goal. Our goal is not to inform our audience, but our goal is, in fact, to persuade that audience. So what we then needed, and how are we going to find a way to come up with an effective thesis statement? How are we going to effectively decide how we want to organize our speech and how we want to organize our thoughts and how we want to ultimately get our audience to say yes to what we want them to say yes to, is to come up with this thing called a Good, everybody, and the proposition is where we learn that we are going to propose an idea to the audience. We're going to propose an action, in this case, for our audience. And in our area of a proposition, so if you wanted to simply look at it as this like definition, what you want your audience to say yes to. For our purpose, I'm going to guide you over here a bit with a couple of these questions as we go through generating how to come up with this proposition or this proposition for persuasive speaking. But as a reminder, you are simply going to come up with the words to persuade to start us off. These are placeholders. Do you need to say this exactly as it is? No, and we'll get around to that as we get later on in the speech. But for the purpose of writing, let's make sure that we have these placeholders there because it will ensure that your structure and process are going in the correct way. So to persuade, now I'm going to put a blank line here. And we're going to ask who. Before in our speech, the who was my audience. It was the individuals in front of you. And it absolutely can still be my audience. So note that this can be the audience of whom you are speaking to. However, what is the one thing that you want that audience to make a change with? So the thing that you have to ask yourself is that first and foremost, what is it that you believe you want the audience to do? What is that one thing? Recycle. Drink water. Exercise. Ride their bike. Take public transportation. Support. So any of those different things, who would be the audience, do you think? Who could be an audience? Drink water, exercise.
Everybody.
Everybody. This could be your class. This could be anybody. So in that case, what you want to start thinking about is if I had a proposition that was to persuade an audience to support or to, like what if we were talking about adopting the proposed, so let's say we're going back to that student that I was talking about enforcement of parking spaces. So let's say it was about parking in the spaces. Fantastic. Who would be the audience for that one?
Students.
The students, yeah, absolutely. But if talking about to persuade my audience that there must be higher consequences for individuals who do not park properly.
Administration.
Now who's in charge of parking rules? Because can you all make changes to the rules for parking?
Yes.
No.
It's going to be a long process, and I don't know if that's the process that you want to take on today. If you need to go, then you would have to research okay, what are my steps to go about activating this on campus, which is fine. But the audience in this case, we have to think who are the people that are capable of the change, and that's what we mean by agents of change. Now we have to remember, and just like Leon says, all of us are agents of change every day. When we think, oh my gosh, I can't make it, that's not my responsibility, or I don't have access to that, yeah, you do. We all have the ability to make change. But in the case of this specifically, if we're talking about this rule, usually it's going to be up to that particular area. So you have to ask yourself about that one thing first. Then, who are the people that can make the change? And then make sure that that thing, water, is something that, oh yes, that would be the individual responsible. My audience here, college students. That's perfect. So what I want each of you to think about is to who you are addressing. And that is what you are going to put in right after the word to persuade. So is it to persuade, and who is that going to be? For the time being, I will put my audience as your space saver. But does that make sense in regard to understanding who we are speaking to? Yeah, okay, awesome. Now, if you want to pick a particular audience to speak to, that is absolutely fine. Note that really where that change is going to come differently will be in your introduction and your conclusion. But additionally, you'll have to take some consideration into, so let's say, for example, we're talking about the board at Santa Monica College. Let's say we're talking about the board at Santa Monica, or we'll talk about the board at Santa Monica College, and maybe you also then need parking enforcement, something like that, the police. So maybe you're just talking to the police. Let's do it that way. That being said, what types of examples and stories and supporting materials are you going to need to use? Ones that appeal to the student? No, ones that would show the plight of the student, but do it in a way that appeals to the needs, the values, and the attitudes, and the purpose of who? Santa Monica College's police force. Does that make sense to you all as to why you would need to adapt those messages? Because the supporting materials need to appeal to the individual audience of whom you are speaking. So consider that as you go forward. So who do you want to change? Keep that focus in mind. And then remember to really try to get into some kind of brainstorming or clustering if you can. Going through the research and starting to see, okay, what types of subsets come out of this. We talked a little bit earlier today, a student and I in here about gentrification, and she was saying that she was going to all these different events and such, and I was saying, oh my gosh, you have so many different ways that you can go. You could say that we should do it, that we shouldn't do it, that we should do something for the elderly, that there should maybe be small, that there must be low-income houses to match the high-income houses in order to manage balance. We can talk about a specific population. There are so many different angles that you can go that you can start to narrow your focus down. But ideally, we want to make sure that there, in fact, is an issue at hand. That is where the need comes in. Every proposition of policy, which is what we are going to be doing, a proposition of policy, if you wanted to write it down there on your paper as a reminder, it's where we are taking action on something. So taking action on something. It's not for somebody to say, oh yeah, this is good or bad, right or wrong. It's not for us to try to assert that something is true, that taking a public speaking class benefits your overall well-being in the workforce. But instead it's urging us to take action, to get up and do something. And we need to ensure that there is, in fact, a problem of that issue. Is that problem representative enough? Meaning, is it affecting a large group of people? Is it affecting them in a way that is, in fact, dangerous, harmful, detrimental, creating inequities, creating particular stereotypes, creating boundaries and walls that individuals can't jump through or jump over due to different circumstances. Right? So we want to make sure that that need is there. I had a student this semester who wanted to argue against affirmative action in schools. And so for me, of course, like since I play on the opposite side of that because I believe in affirmative action in schools, not quotas, affirmative action, that so we constantly were going back and forth, which was a fun argument. But one of the problems that he suggested about affirmative action being utilized in college acceptance is that the majority is not getting to go to their first pick school. Is that a problem?
With the ego.
It's disappointing.
For the ego.
For the ego.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's disappointing, but nobody's getting harmed.
Okay, good. And again, in this idea of the majority, if we're playing that game, yeah, you're going to go to college.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get a job. I'm not worried about it. Like, those two things in part may work.
It sounds like he got denied. I was like, it sounds
Oh,
like
yes. Go ahead.
Does that work? Because what can necessarily college students do about either supporting or being against affirmative action in terms of action?
That's an awesome question. Thank you. And that leads us to the next question on your sheet. And that's what we spoke about a little bit in class as well. Last time. So let me finish up on this idea. Ensuring that there is a need. Is there a large enough issue? Are there enough problems to say, okay, this is something that needs to go forward, that I want to put my foot in, that I want to get in the conversation with? And remember, that's all this speech is you getting in the conversation, understanding the language around it, understanding the different types of positions, and then asserting what your informed opinion is as a expert is doing all the research and such. Does that make sense now? Okay, cool. So the good question that Jessica just asked in regard to, well, what can the audience actually do with affirmative action? So we talked last time that when it comes time for propositions of policy, that there's two different types of these propositions. There's a proposition for immediate action, and then propositions for,
Passive.
thank you, passive agreement. There we go. And what did we say in regard to ones that speeches or propositions of policy for immediate action? Yeah.
You could do something about it
Today, that my chosen audience could get up and take action on this today. Starting a workout program, drinking water, volunteering somewhere, donating blood, putting good study habits in place. All of those things you could take on today if you wanted to. However, in many cases, especially in ones that are a bit beyond what our audience can, in fact, take action on, we then need to write it for something like passive agreement. So in this case, the word, yes, what you were saying there, support, is a really good way to look at it. I had a student this semester also who was doing a speech on California has a new proposed family leave. Gavin Newsom's put it up. It's a 6-month family leave act, right? Now, you all will eventually, in California, if you have the opportunity to vote, potentially vote on this. But in the meantime, the word that the individual used was support. to persuade my audience to support California's new proposed 6-month parental leave act. Does that make sense? Because then it's like, first caregiver gets like 8 weeks, second caregiver gets like 18. Like, I don't know, it's a great deal. And it's a good one. But in this case, the support goes in a couple ways. One, we can't vote on it now. And some individuals in the audience either may, one, not be able to vote due to like being outside of the country, maybe like jail time, potentially being underage. However, support doesn't have to just come in stamping the stamp, right? We can do many different steps beforehand. So it is things like becoming more educated and light grassroots steps that you can take. Talking to your friends about it, going to work at the phone bank when the time comes, and other little areas. And that's the fun part, is that because it's California, because it's Gavin Newsom, he has an entire website there on it. He has all the research and all the information there. So what he's done is he's also listed, or his people have listed, how exactly you can go about making change and starting to support the policy when the time comes. And then, of course, like the last claim would be, okay, and then when it comes time, go ahead and vote for that. Does that make sense, y'all? So utilizing the word support is oftentimes really a great way to encourage this passive agreement on things that we cannot take action on today, either because they're not things that we personally can make change with, or because it's not happening right now, but it potentially will in the future, and that's what we need to keep in mind. Does that make sense, Tal? Does that help to clarify that answer, Oliver? Cool. So keep in mind immediate action or passive agreement. Also, because that's going to be determined by your audience, and it's going to let you know what type of solutions you are going to need to come up with. Because your solutions are how you are going to potentially solve, alleviate, reduce the harms or the issues of your specific problem. So, what you are going to need to have is a plan. Whether or not your plan is listed in your proposition or not is going to be dependent upon your topic. And I know that sounds very bizarre, but you can, if you say the word vote, now we know the specific plan of action. And so everything in the solution is going to be designed around that vote. It is support. Now we know that that is going to be simply ways that you can support. So making sure that you have a couple different plans in your back pocket. But the important part here also is that that plan is practical. Practical to the audience who you are speaking to. Can they take on that responsibility? To ask each of you to donate $1,000 by the end of class is not going to be it was an advantageous goal. But to ask each of you, and I don't know if I told you this, right, but the visual aid passed around, that one student did an addressed envelope with a stamp and passed it out to each person and said, if you can put $1 and put this in the mail today, you'll make this difference happen. That's a practical thing that each of you could potentially do. Put $1 if we wanted to donate. But otherwise, what can we tell our audience to do? What is safe? What is in the realm of action that is going to make a difference, right? What can they do to get up and do it? So it has to be something practical. To leave school and to boycott your job, that may not be the thing to do, right? To like do a walkout, you don't know your type of security or your ability to do so, that may not be possible for you. So making sure that the plan is practical, it's something that they can take on, that's what's going to make it easier for them to say also, yes, look at how easy that is. Looking through your solutions, it's going to be important, and you'll start to read about this in something called logos. There is a type of reasoning, because often, let's say that I wanted to persuade my audience for the federal government, like it says down the first one, to legalize recreational marijuana. Now, I'm going to need to have a plan, and I'm going to need to have a solution And I can't just say, we should do it, it's going to be great. Because we don't know it's going to be great. Nor have I gotten in my time machine to see how it's going to be great. But what we can do is we can use a form of analogical reasoning. Analogical reasoning, everybody. Analogical reasoning is, did you ever, what's an analogy? A metaphor, a simile. You ever hear these words? Linguistic devices, right? So a simile is a comparison between two things that are seemingly not alike. Amanda and the computer. And saying that one is like the other. Amanda was so good at chess. She was like a computer. Amanda was good at chess. Good. What does good mean? What's favorite mean? What's best mean, right? Good? Who knows? We can't explain that. But if I can compare it with, have you ever played a game with a computer? Is it easy? You beat it the first time. You're like, well, Super Mario, and we're done. And Halo done. Right? No! You know that computer and games, that's hard to beat, right? So now that gives you somewhat of a sense of the level that I'm at. Comparison using like or as by two unlike things. A metaphor, a comparison between two things that are seemingly not alike. But instead of saying something's like the other, it says it is the other. I always say where a simile wants to date you, a metaphor wants a long-term commitment. Amanda's genius is a, no, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Amanda is incredibly stubborn. Some would say, wait, no. Amanda was such a hog, she ate all the pizza. I wasn't like a hog, I was a hog, right? So it's simply like making it more of a commitment. My father's anger bursted from his mouth. No, still simile. I was going to say like a volcano, but now you know. Okay, so comparisons. Now, analogies. Different. Taking two things that are alike in some way, that they share a similarity, that there's some type of shared characteristic. You may have seen, well, I don't think they're on the SAT anymore. Like cup is to blank, or crayon is to coloring, as pen is to, and then you're like, I don't know, right? Two things that are the same, but we need to make the connection as to what that common similarity is. So although it is not legal in the U.S., we can't just simply say, oh, I promise it'll work. So what you do instead is you find nations or countries or whatever where a federal government has said, that's okay, let's do it. And then you can make the comparison there. If you play tennis, you'll be good at ping pong. They both have balls and rackets. Are they the same game? No, we can't say that because you're good at one thing, you're going to be good at another. However, we can, if there is one thing that actually is, but your job is to make that connection and show us. So it's really important that not only if you don't have a solution that hasn't been put in or hasn't been employed, it doesn't mean that all hope is lost. A lot of other places have, and many other states have probably already done it, or other organizations. But, and that's what I was going to say also, that the organizations, a friendly reminder, like I showed you on the opposing viewpoint, on opposing viewpoints on the website, was looking at those different organizations who also support your claim, because more than likely they're going to be laying all that out for you and showing you some solutions that can in fact work. And potentially they will have some analogies of other places who have done it as well and implemented it, and it will work. Such as like comprehensive sexual education. Sure, your school may not have had it and nobody else may, but somewhere somebody does. There's also all-access schools. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I just did that recently with a student. There's 23 all-access schools in the United States, but they're really awesome. It provides healthcare and like food and after-school tutoring and of course your education all in one, but it's so that individuals from low-income environments of whom do not have a stable family life and also aren't able to get basic needs can do so in school. So they never have to, that compromise of education that comes so often with not having basic needs doesn't have to be done. But you have to research and find out where those 23 schools are and then just decide, hey, was that working or not? It was. Look at the research. And that's what you're going to use to support and defend your plan. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay, cool. So when you have these plans, you need to make sure that there's some type of research that has suggested that, yes, this will work. Or you can make an analogy comparing it to something similar that has worked as well. Sound good? Okay, cool. Then what we need to do is continue to write our proposition. Let's say we're doing to persuade my audience. Then the next key word is this one, that. Remember last time we were writing our proposition? What word did we have here? We had the word about. Do you remember that? To persuade my audience about. Can you persuade an audience about something? No. The that is going to let us know that whatever is coming next is going to be this declarative statement. So to persuade my audience that, and then what do we want to lead them to? Remember that a proposition, a policy, the easiest way to make sure that you have one is to use the word should or should not. You can always identify a policy speech as well because it will, one, be urging you to take action, but two, it may have these words in it. To persuade my audience that they should volunteer at Habitat for Humanity. To persuade my audience to volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. They're both the exact same thing. They're both telling you the exact same thing. One simply includes the language, but to make sure that you have a proposition or policy, I would include the word should not. To persuade my audience that...
Did you use the word must?
It depends on what you're urging. Yeah. And if that type of language will appeal to the audience. I think that in cases where we are potentially taking action on something outside of ourselves, that oftentimes will work better. For example, to inform my audience that we must start to eliminate or must consume less in order to produce less to save the environment. Something like that. Talking about the environment, it may work, but if I was like to persuade my audience they must donate blood, they're like, okay, get off me. I don't know. Does that make sense? So it's all just wording and language and how it makes sense in context. Because then it also gives them the option. We're not like forcing them. Did you have an idea in mind that you want me to go with? Or were you just like, why wouldn't we use something more persuasive?
No, just should is like there's no like you must do it, but like if you change it to a must, it's like you're more likely to do it.
In some psychological realms, sure.
They were talking about the boomerang effect, though.
Describe your boomerang effect.
That if you like if you try and persuade somebody in a way that like rubs them the wrong way, then they'll do the exact opposite. Of what you want.
It kind of reminds me of like a 4-year-old. You're like, if you get in the water and do blank, this will be great. And they're like, haha, then I'm going to do the opposite, right? Or it's like, you can't do that, Amanda. And I'm like, watch it. I'll show you. I'm going to do this now. Get it. Ha! Right? It's the psychology of your audience, I suppose. So, again, I think it's just one of those things that you can work with your particular topic and then also think about your audience. It's also hard to say that if we must do something to persuade my audience that they must see a professor within the first 3 weeks of school to be successful, like that they must go to office hours to be successful. Is it, if I don't do it, will I still be? So that's a good question to ask. If I don't, will I still be okay? Yeah, then the must isn't actually necessary or needed either.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the purpose, and you can put the word should or should not in, it does not matter, but like I was saying, you can. I'm going to write it like this, should not, and for the purpose of this one, I'm going to use my option of drink and drive. Many people will think that they need to add a because here. This is the reasoning. The only reason that you are going to add a because here is if you want to narrow your focus. To persuade my audience that they should not drink and drive because. Now, if I want to narrow this focus, because right now it's just drinking and driving. That could be about like harming yourself, others. That could be about like property issues. It could be about so many things. But if I started to do the research and realized that there is a potential correlation between something like drinking and driving and college students' future success, then that's what I could add in if I wanted to. So like something like to persuade my audience that they should not drink and drive because drive, and I don't even need to add the because, I could say to, I could say because it can hinder college student overall academic success. And now I know what I am looking to. So now each of my problems are going to be revolved around college students and their academic success. Does that make sense to y'all?
Mhm.
So not in as general, but instead in specific. Do you have to narrow your focus like this? No. But will it make it easier in cases that like topics are really super dynamic? Yes. So even I had a student then who was doing something called deep fakes. Have you ever heard about deep fakes before? Where you can take somebody's face and put it on somebody else's face. Originally designed for the purpose of like movies when individuals pass away. Does that make sense? They can re-face them, put their faces on, kind of match them with others in order to preserve the movie. But individuals have taken it and are using it again. So this individual didn't know if they wanted to do it like for film purposes or that there needs to be some kind of consent form. But the issue that they decided that it's most needed in was within the area of pornography. And so it was that deep fakes must have consent in order to protect people from pornographic replication, something like that. So that's where it narrowed. So then all the problems were just about the area of pornography and just about the specific. Does that make sense, John? So it depends on you, on what you want to add in and how narrow that you want it to get. But once you have your established proposition, we know that we're persuading, we designated our audience, we know that we have the that, so it will be in fact persuasive. They should not, yay, now we know what we want them to do. And what don't we want them to do? 6 things? No. Do we not want them to drink and drive because it's bad and it will harm other people? No, that's a proposition of fact, value, and policy all into one, right? So we want to persuade them. Yeah.
Does that mean you're trying to like persuade them to do a limited amount, like just 2 things instead of 5 things, so they can focus and just drink and drive? That's the only thing. You're not talking about smashing their car, other things to confuse them.
Yeah, absolutely. When we add on like the, because it, harms their something academic success, these 2 things are going to need to be built in together. It's really going to be a cause and effect the entire time. But what I want to make sure is that you're not simply writing all of those claims in there, They shouldn't drink and drive. That they shouldn't drink and drive because it's bad and it's going to be harmful and it's going to hurt people, and that's why. You're like, okay, that's bad doesn't make any sense. I don't know what that means, right? So that's a value speech. It's going to hurt people. Okay, that's not like very clear and clarified. Also, like now you're trying to do a fact. So just making it simple and easy. Also, if people oftentimes get too many propositions in here, then the organizational structure becomes different. Because a proposition of policy is always going to be organized with the same 3 main points. What? Yeah, y'all, I'm going to write those main points for you. How exciting. Okay, so what we are going to do to move down to the thesis statements, all you're going to do is your thesis statement is a combination of your proposition and your main what? Yo! Proposition and main points, y'all. So the proposition. Yeah? All right, let's bring it down to persuade my audience that they should not drink and drive. Ooh, look, it's the exact same thing. Y'all, the proposition here and the proposition here should be the same thing. So if it's not the same thing, don't write it. Write the same thing. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Great, thanks, Ian. Proposition. So to persuade you to not drink and drive, I will first do what? Well, let's talk about it. Now we need to lay out those main points. So every single one of you is going to have the exact same 3 main points. Now when I say exact, not exact, but you know, hopefully, that they will be organized in this order. This order is problem, cause, solution order. The problem, cause, solution order, and maybe you've heard about this before. Anybody? Okay, good to know. It is a very common writing device, so any other time that you're working on writing an argumentative essay, a problem, cause, solution is an organizational pattern that you can use not only in this class, in your writing classes, and any other class that you need to take a actionable, action position. So let's say in your poli-sci class or in your history class, you're making a suggestion, like the government should do something or that people should do something, same pattern. Yeah, hon?
On the discussion, you said organization, method of organization.
Problem, cause, solution.
That's what you would.
Problem, cause, solution. Write it down. It'll ask you for the pattern of organization. What's the pattern of organization? Hopefully it's problem, cause, solution. Yeah! It's a question. Problem, cause, solution. Which is it? What is it called again? That's right, it is. Okay, great. Your first main point, which is always Roman numerals, right? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. There you go. The problem. So the problem's main point, you are going to lay out the problems with either the status quo, if you will, what's happening right now, what's the problem, right? So in this case, it is the problem with what, everybody? What? Yeah! So easy! The problems with drinking and driving. Fantastic. So it's a problem with whatever you are talking about here. Obviously, if you want us to not do this, there's a problem with doing it. If you want us to do something, there's a problem with you not doing something. Does that make sense? So it's first I'll tell you the problems with not volunteering. First I'll tell you the problems that come from not drinking 8 glasses of water, from not getting 8 hours a night of sleep, from not studying for at least 1 hour a day. Yeah? Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So let's talk about this, y'all, because then we're going to just simply write it in. I will first discuss the problems that stem from drinking and driving. Okay, let's talk about that though. Now we'll go into the psychology of an audience. So when somebody tells you to do something, think back to when you were younger or now, I don't know. And whoever reared you growing up said, go clean your room. Your response wasn't no. No. It was instead, why? Why do I need to clean my room? I am perfectly happy sitting here with these clothes around me, with this pizza next to my nightstand. Why do I need to clean it? You saw no need. You were perfectly complacent sitting in your own filth. The same thing is what happens to an audience, especially at this age. Either one, you don't know, or two, you've made the decision that there is no part of me that wants to get up and start exercising right now. So you need to appeal to that audience that there is, in fact, a need for them to get up off their ass and get out and do what you need them to do. Does that make sense? So, how are we going to do that? We need to establish in our problems sound, strong problems that are actually a problem of the issue of drinking and driving. So what are the first problems, if you wanted to say something like this? We would say something like, the first problem that comes from drinking and driving is, go ahead, I'll just give it to you, accident, right? Is this a problem?
Yes.
Is there enough evidence that would show people who get into drinking and driving and get in accidents that things happen from that?
Yes.
Yeah, like they have to. What?
Go to jail.
Okay, good. So the first thing, yeah, so you get in trouble and go to jail, and then there's damaged property, then
Lots
food
of
chances
fines.
is damaged.
House
issue,
arrest.
Right.
Go to jail,
We'll get to
kill
that one. That's a
somebody.
good one too. Yeah, right? So we can lay all that out. We need to lay out the severity of the issue. Then you lay out another. Now listen, the only reason that I am laying out these A's and B's and C's is because I'm giving you a preview of what that skeleton assignment is going to be. But I also encourage you that while you are writing your thesis statement, is that if you do not have at least 3 problems to your issue, do not go forward with it. You are only required to have 2 in each section, 2 problems, 2 causes, 2 solutions, if you will, but no more than 3. That would be way too long for this speech. But if you don't have 3, I would consider really questioning if you're wording this correctly or if you're taking the appropriate angle. Because if your proposition is set up correctly, you have a position that is debatable, you should be able to find more than 2 problems. Sound good? All right, that's a good way to check yourself. You pretty much write the exact same here. The second problem that comes from drinking and driving is the possibility of, yes, death, right? And then we can break that down. It's not just the potential of you dying, it's the potential of somebody else dying as well, right? And so we make that clear. And is that a hard thing? Okay, if you're dead, period. But if you are not dead, you are going to go to jail, or because you will, for vehicular manslaughter, or you will sit in probation for a very long time thinking about what? Killing someone. And that's going to lead to other issues. And I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, right? That could be like a post-traumatic stress. That could be very much a depression, anxiety. How does that affect college students, maybe grades or something like that, obviously, right? The ability to continue and go on. And the last thing, we could say the third problem, if you will, that comes from drinking and driving is a DUI. It's the one thing that people are constantly concerned about, especially at this age. It's also if we look at it statistically of how brains are formed, and not everybody in the class like falls between this age, but like decision making and all of that, the first thing that we were often thinking about is like, oh my gosh, I'm drinking and driving, I don't want to get a DUI. It's not like, I don't want to drink and drive because I don't want to kill someone. If you said that out loud, you would never get probably into that car, right? Because that kind of severity. But we oftentimes think about this DUI, I don't want to get caught doing it, right? So what happens, and is a DUI a problem? Yes! How much money is a DUI going to cost you?
$20,000?
Yeah, between $10,000 and $15,000. I don't know if you have that sitting around in your pocket, but that's what it's going to be. Then you're going to have your license suspended for a year. You can only go to and from school and work. That creates another additional challenges. Then you have to get your lawyer fees and all those bills and everything that's going on. You have to go to particular classes. If you have more than one DUI, oh my gosh, forget it. You're really going to jail for then. Then all at the same time, remember as college students, when it comes time to mark a box on that application for the job that you've been working so hard for, and it says, have you ever been convicted? And you're like, oh crap, I have. And they're like, what? And you're like, DUI, because you have to write it in. And then they're looking at that person who's really strongly educated, i.e. you, and who has worked so hard, and oh yes, you've worked so hard for all those A's, but look down here, it says DUI, and then they compare it to that person who maybe didn't go to like all the things that you did. Who would they rather hire? The person who was super smart on paper but super irresponsible, or the person without the DUI that isn't going to be a liability? I'm going to say the opposite. So don't throw your entire education and future away simply by getting behind the wheel, friends. Don't drink and drive. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Hopefully you know it's a problem. Don't freaking do it. What's up?
Oh, you could also say, college students, we like to travel during our summers, and you can't get into Canada without paying a $2,000 fine.
Yes, that was something. That is very, and yes, I do know that.
There.
They don't want you there,
Yeah.
Canadian. They're like,
gotta
no, what are you going to come in and do? Here, well, give me money, and then I'll maybe think about letting you do something. Good.
One of my really close friends got one, and then I was actually traveling through Canada, and she was in Alaska, and I invited her to meet me, and she's like, I can't because I have to pay $2,000. So I was like, what? So that's how I know. Because it's a big bummer to have her do that.
Oh, your car insurance. You know how much your car insurance goes up to? I mean, it nearly doubles. It could be like $800 a month, if that's what it is. It'll double. Whatever your car insurance is now, it'll double. So I don't know how much you're making graduating college, but $800 a month on a car insurance? That's a lot of money.
I had a friend that worked for the government.
Oh, and do you know how long it's on your record?
Lost her government
10
job.
years. 10 years. Mothers Against Drunk Driving got that moved to 10 years a couple of years ago. So for the next 10 years, you have to mark that down and getting a job and everything.
She was dumb.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm saying is, for each of you, the easiest way to make sure that your problem is in fact a problem of the issue is to go back and check. If you write it out in this parallel structure, just for the purpose of like today or for the fun of it, the first problem that comes from drinking and driving, the second problem that comes, the third problem, and then what you can do is be like, accidents. Is an accident a problem of drinking and driving? Yes. If I put here, depression, is this the problem, or is this the effect, in this case, of the problem? An effect of the problem. But don't let that fool you, because on other speeches, if I wanted to say something like the first problem that comes from engaging in social media is depression. That is a direct problem of social media today with college students, or adolescents, college students. Does that make sense, y'all? So don't feel like that's always a no-no. Do you all feel like you would be able to design those problems and come up with something?
I hope so.
I do too! I think that you will. Yeah.
Good question.
Of course.
What's the size of the problem? Like, what's the smallest thing you can think of? Like,
Oh,
Like,
why?
again-
What are you thinking of?
no, I'm just
Oh,
curious.
okay.
Like, 'cause I'm kind of unsure what I want to do my topic on still. So I'm kind of like what's like the smallest we can do? What's the biggest we can do? Really?
Oh,
Could he-
I would have to see it in context.
Could you
to be able
convince
to-
us that burnt toast is better than regular toast?
That's where good question.
I mean,
But that would be a comparison, so it's not
Like
a
that.
should or should not. So that would be a proposition of fact to begin with, or sorry, it would be value better than because it's their specific one. But yeah, I would have to know, like,
Okay.
see it. But again, if it affects,
Okay.
again, and we can make it so that it's all interconnected. Because let's be honest, every single one of us, you make a move and it affects every single one of us all. Simply being able to explain that within 5 to 7 minutes is one of those things that you want to
No, I'm
keep
just
in
making
mind.
sure. I didn't know if it had to be like life threatening or if it was like. If
No. Yeah, absolutely. Life. Does it damage your life? Does it damage your schoolwork? Is it harming the environment? Is it
Yeah.
hard to get to place to place?
Yeah, I just didn't know if it had to be like
Uh-uh.
super crazy big. And it was kind of like.
No, like the examples that it says there, you can talk about anything, but also making sure that it's just at a mature college level. That's an important thing. But good. All right, y'all. The next idea here is the hardest one. This is, and I don't say it's the hardest one. It's the easiest and it's the most fun main point to write. But it is hard for people to get their mind about what they're trying to do because of how it's written. So if you can, bear with me. But what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about, it's called the causes portion of the speech, or your causes main point. But it oftentimes is much easier if you replace the word causes with reasons. Why in the world is this still a problem? We just laid out that people get in accidents, that they are dying, that they are ruining their lives by being in jail or, minimizing their ability to get through places because they have a DUI. But people are still drinking and driving, right? You hear about it every day. How many of you have those, like, every 10 minutes people come to your school when you're younger? Like, somebody comes and shows, like, a crash car. Right. They're showing you this, and if you didn't see that, that's okay. They would come to schools and do these presentations on drinking and driving because people are still doing it, right? It's still an issue. And so why are people still drinking and driving? Why is your policy not being implemented? Why are people not drinking 8 glasses of water a day? Why are people not in support of a family leave policy? Why are people not in support of DACA? Why are people in support of a wall? These are the questions that you have to look at when we address the opposition. So last time in class I told you that this part of the speech, or the second main point of the speech, is going to be where you are going to say and address the people of whom either disagree or are on the fence with what you are talking about. Like I said with the opposing viewpoints, it's really great because it gives you the opposition. It gives you the reasons as to why people are against particular topics. Now, not everybody may be able to find their topic on opposing viewpoints, but there certainly is a ton of evidence and research out there that is going to be easily found, and it's on this crazy place called the internet, where everybody likes to put their opinions about everything. So you're going to find out reasons as to why. Now, like I said before, also on those organizational websites that I was telling you about, they are going to lay out their website problem, cause, solution as well, because it's easiest for the audience to grasp, and it's more likely that they will come to a yes proposition if it is organized in that way. So you will be able to find reasons as to why people disagree as well. But this is what we want to bring up. So this is where we call the target audience. You ever hear of a target audience?
Mm-hmm.
Right here, evident. Oh, and I'm so sorry, hon. Did you have a question? Oh, were you going to answer my questions of the why do people drink and drive?
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Huh?
Fine. That's my first one. Fine. But hold on 1 second. I'm going to podcast. And then you can give me yours. Here we go.
Target audience.
Target audience!
Well done, Ian.
You all are really excited about being in my class. And you're like, I am totally voting for Amanda for Super Fun Teacher of the Year. I'm so excited. It's a job. It's a total award, and I'm excited about it. But you all are amazing, and I appreciate your support. Thank you. Now, these 3 rows are like, got still 5 days. Jury's out. I'll let you know.
Days, Jesus.
These rows over here are
glasses.
like, I, in
That's it.
fact, thought that was the worst class ever. And there is no way in HE double hockey sticks that I will ever vote for Amanda. Ideally, who is my target audience? Or who do we look at for the target audience? In things like maybe an election like this, in a voting process.
Probably them, right?
Yeah, on the
So
side.
that side.
Okay, why do we not?
Because you've already got our
Target these.
vote.
I already have their vote. To come to them and just continue to tell them what they want to hear
How
all
great you
about
are.
me, how great I am, etc. It's fine. It's not that it's wasted breath, but it's the same reason that political candidates oftentimes do not visit California. Because California is a democratic state. Individuals who are Democrats will come like 2 times as a thank you. Republicans who are coming will come a couple times and be like, thank you. But ultimately, they go to places like Florida,
Mm-hmm.
Michigan.
Iowa,
Michigan.
like 17 to 18 times during an election. Because
the
they
tiny
are what's
towns.
called a swing vote, right? A swing state. So they could go either way. So the idea is that when we are looking for the reasons of the causes, we want to look at the people who are either on the fence or against us as well. My mom is like the perfect example for this. So my mom and dad used to be big donators, and not big donators. What are they doing, writing huge checks now? But they used to throw some money, right, at the Republican Party. That was the first Bush term. Second Bush term, George W. They decided they flipped it because my mom was like, I can't get on board with this anymore. What is happening here? And usually my parents were always like, we vote for the person, not for the platform. I'm like, okay. But neither here nor there. I remember being at their house and being like, hello, and whatever. And it's like, can I speak with Mrs. Aquino? And I'm like, oh, yes, Nancy's calling. And then it was, this is the Republican National Party. I was like, good luck, okay, hold on. So I go, and I'm like, oh. Because she's one of those ones who's like, you know, Ms. Aquino, can we count on your vote? We haven't seen anything coming through. We want to make sure that we can count on your vote for President Bush in the next election. And my mom's like, well, I don't really know if I can. Well, why is that, Mrs. Aquino? Get ready to cozy in for a long winter's nap, right? So then she sits down, and then she starts listing out the reasons. I don't know what he's doing with women's health care. I am not sold on No Child Left Behind. Why are we still in this war, right? These are all the things that she has outstanding that she's like, I can't in good faith give money to this guy or this party, so I don't know. So instead of the intern putting down their phone and being like, ugh, there wasn't even a cell phone back there. I don't know why I'm doing that. And then just like putting down a phone, like starting to do something else, that intern is doing what? Taking notes. So that when George Bush, if he is smart, comes back to California and has to randomly talk to a demographic of 40 to 60-year-old women, what best he be talking about? All those issues, right? Don't talk about what you want to talk about. You address what the audience, because in your head, your audience is still asking those questions. Yeah, but what about? But what about? But how? But why? Your job is to address that, to fill up the hole that they're trying to poke in your argument, and to show them, as Aristotle would say, the error of their ways of thinking. And this is a really fun way. This will teach you how to properly debate somebody or have an argument. So we call this the causes, but if you wanted to use the reason, it could be. So this would be, I will first discuss the problems that stem from drinking and driving. Then I will explain some of the reasons why people drink and drive. So like we said before, there are causes. Now the issue here with the causes, the second main point, reasons against/on fence, can't make a decision yet. And again, you're going to want to come up with at least 2, no more than 3 reasons that we can look at. If you cannot argue that reason and prove it, could be potentially better than true, etc. So this is the deal: is that eventually you're going to have to concede a little bit to this. I'm jumping ahead. Let me write this out first. If I said the first reason that people are drinking and driving is because they think they are fine. So have you ever heard somebody say that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, you shouldn't be drinking. I'm fine. Because I've only had a couple drinks. And I had a bunch of food. And I drank a bunch of water. Please, I'm bigger than you, Amanda. I'm fine. Look at me, I'm fine.
Pass out.
So, do you have friends who can drink a lot and are perfectly functioning? Yeah. Absolutely. So you concede. Sure. Some of you may be experienced drinkers and able to function. Then we refute. But, then you put in the reason why. Even though somebody says they're fine, what's the counter argument? Better to be safe than sorry. Good. That's true. It is better to be safe than sorry. But what can you logically reason with them? I'm always safe because it's not going to affect me. I'm always safe. I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. Look, I can do this. I'm safe.
Well, yeah, it takes 30 minutes for the last drink to hit your blood.
So my father was a police officer, right? We told us about that on the first day of class. And he pulled over somebody one time who was perfect. He pulled them over for like something random. Who even knows what. And then he was getting an idea that this person you could smell alcohol on them. So he was like, perfectly, like, fine. Finally, at the end, my dad was like, have you had anything to drink? Coming to find out, he had like a 1 point something blood level. Like talking to him and like having a dissertation. He was an alcoholic. He was fully functioning. But it doesn't matter how fine you think you are because biology is always going to prove you wrong. Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is nobody cares how fine you are. They care what number you blow on an alcohol test. So even if you say you are fine and then you bring out the chart. Look, you know that chart they give you? Like if you have one spirit and you weigh this much, you are okay, right? Or this is how long you should wait. So even if you think that you are fine, when you get pulled over, the police officer of whom does so will not think that you are fine. And in turn, you will go to jail, and then it will all start over again, right? Then we can go back to it. And that is why you should not drink and drive. So you'll have to argue it in that way. If you do not have something to counter-argue with. So, like, this company is going to lose money. You're like, oh, they are going to lose money. Sure. But that's where you can start to play it. Sure, you may lose a little money. But on the back end, think about either how we can save or our lives more important. Like, what can you leverage that with? And specifically for your audience, leveraging with values are oftentimes important, right? They think they are fine. What was your reason that you were going to give?
I was going to say because, like, they don't really plan for it, like, to get a ride home or something.
Okay, good. So you would say plan for it, okay, but the most specific thing would be that people want what? Their car. Absolutely. That's the thing. They need, because you can get a ride potentially, but it's like people want their car at home with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that's a totally valid reason. Now, the only thing that I want you to remember here is that I had a student one time who said the reason that they want to drink and drive is because it's fun.
Until you kill someone.
Oh, wow.
No, I know. And I'm literally like, did you do work on it? So bottom line, you never really need to explain the claim if it's knowledge that we all share. Your claim, however, is going to need to be explained if it's something like, because they say it's fun. Because I can't see somebody being like, yeah, it's fun. But there was a study done on a college campus, and the students, like 38% of them said that they drank and drove because they thought it was like a video game or like fun. And I was like, shut it down. People are actually thinking that. And so I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. And so then you argue, yeah, it's all fun and games until
It's
you're in jail, and then you have to like make it worse, right? So then we bring up the evidence again.
So sorry, are you refuting these claims within your causes paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay.
And don't worry about writing that first. I just want to simply make sure, like, if you're forecasting, like, am I going to have reasons that I can argue that you're going to, like, before you go on with your topic, just to make sure that you have those. But we'll go over how to write each main point in depth. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah.
Was it 3 reasons or causes for, and then 3 reasons against, like ABC causes for, and then ABC against, or just one together?
For the causes here.
Yeah, because I think before it said reasons as causes, and this says causes, reasons against.
Oh, okay.
Is it three on each side?
So causes and reasons,
Or
same
could it
word.
be either one?
Same word.
Okay.
Just use it as the reason. So it's the causes of why people are still polluting. Or it's the causes of why this, for example, law has yet to be put in. What are the reasons why they have yet to let that law go through? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last one. This is finally where we come forward. And finally, present some solutions to not drink and drive. So the solutions here are going to be exactly what it says here. By the end, you should now be giving us, now I'm like, good God, you're right, I should not be doing this. Oof. You're right, I should be drinking 8 glasses of water a day. How do I get that in my body? Come on, give it to me now, give it to me now. So let's give you a plan. So for the solutions, this is, again, what you want to look at even before you get into writing these out, because you want to make sure that this does have a practical solution. So drinking and driving solutions, this will be your third main point. And so the first way one can stop drinking and driving, or not like all of you are doing it, not drink and drive, is by, now, we need to look back at the top. In our first main point, the problems, we had something like accidents, death, right? DUI. How many solutions are there in actuality to making all of these things go away?
One.
Just don't drink and drive, right? Absolutely. Don't drink and drive. All of this goes away. However, oftentimes, individuals will need to address a particular solution for each of the problems, because maybe one part of that solution, so for example, if I said, get an Uber, didn't apply to one of these, like it would not take this away, then I would need to lay that out and make it clear. Don't worry so much about this right now until you get your topic written, but I want to make sure that when we start to look at, in fact, our solutions, just keep this in mind. We want to come up with things that are novel. Clearly, people have been saying don't drink and drive for years, and people are still doing it. Potentially even somebody in this class. Who knows? So we want to make sure that we are giving them something that is new, that is novel. Just to say like, oh, sign up with a friend. Don't do it. Give your car keys to somebody. Oh, okay, we've heard those before, but like, what's the practical example? So when we were talking about like even having your car, right? So like the first way that we want to do that, in Santa Monica, there's a scooter service. One of my students brought this in like years ago about the scooter service. So you call them, they scoot over to your car, they put the scooter in the trunk, they drive you home, and then they scoot away.
Whoa.
They have that in Santa Clarita too, up at my parents' house, where there's a couple that does it. And so one person falls behind in a car, and one person drives your car, and they drop you out at the house, and then they come back. And it's a couple. Their son died in a drinking driving accident. So now they take it's $20, and I was like, you can have 40. Take this as a donation. Thank you so much. I took it once.
I know on certain holidays, like AAA will offer towing your car
Yeah.
a certain amount of miles, and they'll take you.
See? Yeah, and that's a great one too. Yeah, certain amount of holidays or anything. So good. Those are novel things that you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Also, yeah, know your driver's rights. Like get in your cab, and if you don't have money, go somewhere where somebody does. and make them wait there. Like, you have the rights to do these things. So start to think about that. But in essence, does this structure make sense to you? And do you understand that the first main point is establishing that there is a need for us to do something? There's a need for me to be giving this speech. And then the second part, that second main point, is for you to address the reasons why people don't think that we need to do this. You're like, listen, y'all, that sounded good, but you were wrong. Mm-hmm. And then the third way is like, all right, now you've done it. Here's the way that you're going to do it. Here's the first step. Here's the second step. Here's how we can incorporate it. Here's how we can get it going. Does that make sense to y'all? Okay. So in this pattern of writing, do you see how each of you will have the problems, causes, the solutions in your thesis statement? In your proposition, you'll have one declarative idea that you would like to go with. Yeah? And then you all know to turn that in tonight by 11:59 p.m. And you can always just email me in advance if you want to make sure that you're correct before putting it to the discussion board, especially if you're not going to be able to recheck in or do something like that because it worked. Let me know and we can work it out. I have your speeches over here. What I'm going to ask, though, is if you wouldn't mind